Hey, look at this. Good boy. Friends, so much has happened. The big event of the last 6 weeks is that we released a public demo for Steam FPS Fest. And that's been going good. The response has left both Ash and I super pumped. A handful of streamers are playing it and liking it. A few really got it, which is great. That was me slapping my hands on my lap. There's no video for that, but whatever. A few folks have gotten us some really solid, helpful feedback, which is great because we're keeping the demo up and we're updating it as if it was a full game. Just forever demo. So that means that feedback that we've gotten has already produced meaningful changes that are in the game right now. Quality of life fixes, bug fixes, a few bigger things like adding Chinese localization, all kinds of stuff. So if you haven't played the game yet, go hit it up on Steam, try out the demo, join the Discord, hit us up on socials, links in the description. We'd love to hear what you think. For real! But that's not all. The run-up to the demo was super significant too. We ran a playtest beforehand and got some really valuable feedback, and we made a few really big changes before the demo even went live. So the first thing was the difficulty ramp. Oops! We accidentally made a hard game! There's a dozen different things that contributed to this, but the first iteration we made was to ease the speed that new enemy types were introduced, as well as the speed at which the total number of enemies grew. So instead of 9 standard arenas, which is what we had before, we now have 16, I think. I don't have it in front of me, but it's a lot. It's a lot more. We immediately saw an improvement for how new players were able to get acclimated and learn the ropes, and that's great. And speaking of learning the ropes, we simplified the tutorial. Yay. The previous tutorial was more open-ended. It was almost like an arena, except there were these hint signs everywhere that taught the basics, and there weren't any enemies in there that could hurt you. It was neat. The intention was, a big part of the learning curve is just getting comfy with the controls, so, let's give a nice open space for people to get comfy. But the issue was that for new players, it just felt undirected, and they ultimately didn't have the context they needed in order to really understand what they should be doing. Once you have experienced an arena proper, then you know what you want to practice. Beforehand though, it was all a little bit mushy. So we made the tutorial linear and fast in order to get players to the main game as efficiently as possible. I think there's probably a version of the old tutorial that would work really well and be well received and do its job nicely, but it would take a lot more time to iterate and really figure that out. And Ash and I are trying to make a mini FPS, bite-size action game. We don't want to be indies who work on their game for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, right? We are, as I like to say, ruthlessly pragmatic. And we frequently cut ideas that we think might be cool, but will just take too much time to really do right, to do well. We often put them on the shelf so that, maybe we can take them down later once we have a better idea of how to, do it efficiently. But that leads us to another topic, fame. The game originally had this concept of fame, or reputation as we called it. Do well in the arena and you're rewarded fame. It was a gate for your progress. You had to reach higher levels of fame before you were allowed to fight in the bigger arenas. Was also super closely tied to the main narrative themes of the game, as well as the ending that we had been talking about. But it was weirdly confusing to players. We weren't doing a good job at communicating what fame was and what it wasn't. So we cut it. And with that, we basically cut the narrative we'd been talking about for a year. It was a big deal. Ash and I both want to make small games that are about a thing. Capital letters. That was a thing we agreed before we ever actually started collaborating. So for us to cut the system that tied into the thing Gobsmacked is about, capital letters, big deal. Very big deal. But the game is better for it. It's faster. It's clearer. There are still things we can talk about, capital letters. There are still themes in the game. And whatever we end up saying will be better, or at least a better fit than what we were trying to do originally. You know, this is related to a story from when I was in high school. I was in high school during the dot-com boom, late 90s. And back then, if you were someone who knew how to use Photoshop, you could get a job as a, quote, graphic designer. And lucky for me, I did know how to use Photoshop because I was a teenager with a genuine interest in digital art and a cracked copy of Photoshop. Yay. So I was an intern at this graphic design firm, and in the room that the other interns and junior designers sat in, there was nothing on the walls except a poster with big block letters, and it said, "Don't fall in love with your work." It's a super important lesson to learn, especially at an early age. I was maybe 7. And I've carried that to this day, and I say it to my own students. No one is perfect, thus our work is imperfect, and we need to be okay with changing it, sometimes radically, as we develop it and cultivate it. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to make radical changes if you love the thing you've made. Save love for other people, but have a professional relationship with your work. So, what's the future looking like? We have the last bits of content to make, which are mostly weapons, stuff like that, big flashy things. We've got to settle on our ending. We've got a bunch more demo events on Steam coming up, but I don't know if those are actually public yet. I don't know if they've talked about it, so I'm not going to talk about that here. But in the coming months, there's going to be more demo events, and we're going to be part of those. And then we've got early access, our early access launch in just a few months. Pretty exciting, pretty crazy. A lot of good stuff. That's it for now, though. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time. Cheers.